In the sensorial stage, we saw how the self begins to take shape, not as a thought or image, but as a rhythm, a breath, a contour of sensation. The body becomes the first place of meaning, and coherence forms through tone, touch, and presence. Experience is immediate, immersive. The infant is still in the sea, moved by its currents, not yet knowing they are a wave. But slowly, something begins to shift. The infant starts to notice that some sensations arrive with consistency. Softness when being fed, pressure when being held. These patterns don't just feel good, they begin to mean something. The field, once purely felt, begins to stir with trace, with implication. This is the beginning of the symbolic self. And it doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds like a tide, first subtly, then unmistakably. The caregiver's presence begins to leave an internal echo. A gesture or rhythm is repeated, remembered. A soft blanket, a heartbeat, a gaze, all begin to carry significance beyond the moment. They no longer just are, they represent. And in that moment, the world begins to organize differently. Not as a break from the body, but as an extension of its memory. Not as a departure from relationship, but as a new form of holding. This is where the self begins to bridge, between presence and absence, between feeling and form, between self and other. The wave begins to crest. At the heart of this symbolic emergence is a powerful tension. The infant begins to feel the caregiver as other. In the earliest months, there is no such distinction. The caregiver's touch, gaze, rhythm, they are not separate from the infant's experience. They are the experience. But as patterns form, the infant begins to sense that these comforting rhythms are not arising from within, but from beyond. Warmth, pressure, and contact now seem to arrive, sometimes predictably, sometimes not. And with that, the infant begins to perceive separation. This realization brings both possibility and pain. On the one hand, it opens the door to relationship, the recognition of another being with their own presence, their own rhythm. But on the other hand, it brings the reality of absence. The gaze turns away. The arms don't always hold. The rhythm pauses. These micro breaks, these absences, don't simply rupture connection. They create a space in which something new can form, a symbol. Symbols emerge as bridges. The blanket that smells like the mother becomes a carrier of her presence. A rhythm and rocking recalls being held. The image of a caregiver lingers even after they've left. These are not just comforts, they are internal representations, early forms of memory that hold affect, sensation, and relational tone. Symbol formation allows the infant to stay coherent in the face of separation. It says, even when she's not here, I can still feel her. It's a way of metabolizing complexity, a way of saying, what I once had, I now carry inside. And it's not just objects that become symbolic, actions do too. A cry begins to mean hunger. A look means recognition. Repetitions in movement or sound begin to represent emotional states or longings. These gestures are not only expressions of need, they're early languages of the self. This is how the psyche begins to speak, not in sentences, but in gestures of memory. And from this capacity, everything else begins to unfold. As symbols take root through image, rhythm, and gesture, a profound transformation begins. The symbolic self learns to speak. But long before words arrive, there is language. The body is already speaking in a proto-language of tone, of movement, of gaze and gesture. These rhythms are deeply relational. They are mirrored, repeated, and infused with meaning through interaction. And then, as the symbolic self grows, a leap occurs. The child begins to assign shared symbols, words, to experience. Mommy, mine, hungry. A word like hungry doesn't just describe a state, it provides a structure for it. A child can now name what they feel, and in doing so, begin to hold it, shape it, and share it. Language is more than vocabulary. It is the bridge between the internal relational world and the external social world. It gives form to time and sequence. I was sad. You came back. Tomorrow I go. It allows for the construction of narrative, of identity, of memory. And yet, language is delicate. In a resonant field, it becomes a tool of integration. A word doesn't just name, it reflects, contains, and connects. But when language is used without attunement, without resonance, it can fragment experience. It can become a mask, a wall, a defense. In that sense, language is both a gift and a risk. It gives the self the ability to represent experience, but also the temptation to escape it. It allows the self to narrate identity, but also to get stuck in the very story it tells. Still, at its core, language is a continuation of the field, not separate from the body, but a new layer of expression emerging from it. When the child says mommy and looks to the door, they are doing something sacred. They are holding presence through sound. They are extending coherence through time. And even now, as adults, when we speak with truth, with tone, with care, we are still doing the same thing. We are using language to bridge what is felt with what can be shared, to bring the depths to the surface. As language, image, and narrative begin to organize the symbolic self, they offer structure. They help the child make sense of experience, hold memory, and form identity. But like any structure, they come with a risk. They can become rigid. Symbolic forms, words, roles, self-stories, are meant to be flexible. They're containers, not cages. But under stress, especially when the child doesn't feel safe or seen, these forms can harden into defenses. A simple belief like I am unlovable or the world is dangerous isn't just an idea, it's a frozen symbol. One that once served to make sense of chaos or protect against pain, but now traps the self in an outdated shape. This is why flow is so important. Flow keeps the symbolic self alive. It allows stories to change, meanings to evolve, and language to soften. It creates space for identity to breathe. When the field feels safe, the psyche stays fluid. It doesn't rush to meaning. It allows symbolic images, memories, and associations to emerge, not just be assigned. In many traditions, this quality of flow is captured by the concept of wu-wei, effortless action or non-forcing. In development and in therapy, wu-wei is about attuned responsiveness. It's letting go. It's letting symbols reveal themselves rather than forcing interpretation. It's trusting that coherence will arise if the conditions are right. When trauma or fragmentation occurs, symbolic structures can lock around survival meanings. The child or adult may begin to organize around beliefs and identities that no longer serve them. But even then, the symbolic field is not lost. It's simply frozen. Flow is what allows us to re-enter that frozen place, to refeel, reimagine, and re-author the meaning that lives there. Through compassionate attention, symbols that once held pain can begin to open. A gesture, a word, a story. Each can become something new. And just as water can soften stone over time, so too can the fluidity of presence soften the edges of rigid belief. This is how the symbolic self grows, not by building bigger walls, but by deepening its riverbeds, by learning to hold complexity without drowning in it. While language and image often take center stage in symbolic development, it's easy to forget something essential. The body is a symbolic system too. From the beginning, the body carries traces of meaning. It responds not only to what is happening, but to what has happened. To rhythms of contact and absence, to emotional tone, to patterns of stress and safety. As the symbolic self develops, these meanings don't disappear into words. They remain inscribed in the body as posture, breath, tone, illness, and rhythm. The nervous system, especially the stress response, begins to mirror symbolic content. A child who experiences repeated abandonment may not just feel anxious, they may embody that absence through chronic sympathetic arousal or a collapsed parasympathetic withdrawal. The body becomes the echo of what could not be fully held. Likewise, the gut, immune, and metabolic systems begin to carry the imprint of relational meaning. A child who wasn't emotionally nourished may metabolize unpredictably, digest erratically, or carry immune patterns of vigilance or inner conflict. These aren't just biological facts, they are somatic metaphors. The body becomes a map of meaning, shaped by the emotional weather of development. And even in adulthood, this continues. We say things like, I carry this in my shoulders, I feel it in my gut, my chest tightens when I speak. These are not just figures of speech, they are literal reflections of symbolic experience, the psyche and soma speaking through one another. So when we work with the symbolic self, we are never working with language alone. We are working with breath, with pulse, with inflammation, with fatigue. We are working with the field of meaning as it lives in the flesh. And this is perhaps the deepest truth of the symbolic self. It is not a departure from the body. It is the body learning to carry coherence across time. It is the body remembering how to speak and how to be heard. The symbolic self is where the field begins to take form, not as something fixed, but as something felt, remembered, and represented. Through gesture, image, word, and story, the self begins to extend itself across time, to hold what is no longer present, and to imagine what has not yet come. Symbols are not a break from the body. They are the body's way of reaching toward meaning. And while they may freeze or fracture under strain, they can also soften, reform, and become bridges again. In this way, the symbolic self does not replace what came before, it rises from it. A cresting wave drawn upon the same ocean of sensation, presence, and relational rhythm. It is the shape coherence takes when the self begins to see itself reflected in the world. If this perspective resonates with you and you would like to see more similar content, Please like and subscribe. In the comments, please feel free to share your thoughts on the symbolic aspects of human experience. In the next video, we'll explore some practical implications for how to nurture the symbolic in your day-to-day life. Thank you for listening.